Okay, right, just going to spend a bit of time about some changes regarding the certification of installers and engineers. There's quite a few changes, in fact. This presentation is in particular associated with being able to become certified online. But you might recall from this morning there has been a change that PI, if you've done the certified courses in the past, if you did this more than 5 years ago and you asked for your name to appear on the PI website, it is no longer there. PI felt uncomfortable about keeping records for such a long time as they had no evidence that that individual was actually practicing the skills that they had. It doesn't mean that your certification has been lost. If you are not concerned about being on the website and you did take the certification, it is still valid. It's just that you won't be able to be found on the website. If you want to get back on the website, then what you will have to do is do some form of refresher training. It's unlikely to mean a complete rerun of that in specific course, and we've yet to define that. We'll be announcing that early quarter one of next year. But one of the things that PI were particularly interested in, particularly with the pandemic, is being able to offer the certified training in an online format. And that's been quite contentious. It's took us a long time to get to a format that PI in particular are comfortable with. It doesn't suit everybody, but it's now another offering. So at the moment, the way in which we deliver certified training is we either deliver it at the premises of the client or we run it several times a year for individuals at the training centre at Henderson Hauser in Manchester. But now, from 2022, there's going to be another way of doing that, and that is basically online training. So if I just show you briefly how this is set up, most apply to both Profibus and Profinet. So if we look at the installer, certified Profibus installer, certified Profinet installer as well, then the course consists of a theory and a practical aspect. In terms of the course content, then you access this entirely remotely. It's pre-recorded material covering the learning outcomes of this particular course. It's basically aimed at anyone involved in the design, installation or support of Profibus and Profinet networks. It's certainly not aimed at just the installers. The whole idea of certification is we've got to see that that particular person has been able to practice what they've just learned in the form of an exam. And we're going to do this. This is going to be primarily aimed to groups rather than individual. We're going to do this in the form of an online exam day, which I'll explain shortly. So that's the installer. If that's what you've done in the past, it can now be delivered online. We also do the Profibus commissioning and the Profinet commissioning and maintenance, which is a non-certified course. So there's no exam associated with this. And in this aspect, the theory, again, self-paced, timed access. In other words, there's pre-recorded material that you have access to for a period of time, as well as the PDF copy of the notes, which are yours to keep. But the practical part, the actual interacting with the network, is a combination of self-paced but also instructor-led. So we basically set up a TeamViewer meeting, and fundamentally you end up accessing our network remotely, and then you can interact with whatever the analysing tools are that we're using at the time. But as it says there, a non-certified course for technicians and engineers who want a basic introduction to auditing and fault finding on the respective network. If we move on to the engineer course, then this is as far as you can go, or it used to be as far as you could go with Profibus, and is currently as far as you can go with Profinet. So again, this is engineers wanting a really in-depth knowledge of the Profibus or Profinet protocol and more advanced fault finding techniques. So the practical exam takes the form of faults being put on the network, physical, in the PLC, with the devices, and the guys on the course have to find those faults using the analysing tools that we've used during the week. Now we're basically talking here of doing it online. So the course content, the theory, self-paced again. The practical, a combination of self-paced and instructor-led, where you're going to have access to a live network. And again, the exam of this is associated with an online exam day. There is another course, at the moment only associated with Profibus, but there are plans to bring in a Profinet, and this is a certified Profibus system designer. So it's primarily aimed at people who don't support Profinet or Profibus networks, but want some idea of how to design it. And it goes beyond Profibus itself. It looks at other things, availability and things like that. And again, no practical in this. It's self-paced course content and then the exam day. So, one thing that we were asked to include was that that when people are doing this, they'll be doing it over a period of time. We didn't want them to work in isolation, so the plan is that you will be given direct access to the instructor, either in the form of a Teams meeting or email. If there's something that in particular that is just not getting through to you, you've got that during the preparation for the exam. The general idea of how it's going to work is that, okay, we have at the bottom left our office, and we have their Microsoft Teams where the instructor is going to be sat. This is the student at the top in their home-based office or their office. And what we're wanting is a PC with a microphone and webcam enabled at all time. And depending on the course that you're doing, you'll need Microsoft Teams if there's any interaction with the instructor, TeamViewer if there is any interaction with the live network, and then a web browser, and you'll be using that to interact with these online exams. So we're using an organisation called Thinkific to do the theory content, and that basically will create a unique exam for you individually from a questions database. So it's not always going to be the same questions time after time. And the theory exam, that's the theory content. The theory exam is basically what I've just said. The idea is it will randomise questions from a set of questions database. So that's the interaction. If we look at the very bottom though, this idea of using TeamViewer, then basically we have a number of PCs that are permanently connected to the network, and it might be just worth showing you what this network is made up of. Even if this is not of interest to you and you're interested in doing the courses in either at your premises or at Henderson Hauser, just thought it might be worthwhile considering all of the technology that you've been taught about today. Just let's have a look at what we would be covering in Profibus in this particular case. So all of this in a dotted line is in one single rack that sits at the front of the room. And we have a PLC. Here's an indication of the way that Siemens think the market's going, is that you buy an S7-1200 and there is an absence of a Profibus port. So the first thing you have to do is buy a module with a Profibus port. So there's a cost implication of that, but nonetheless, they are still supporting it. What we've also got is we've got a number of infrastructure components. We've got a repeater on the left-hand side, and then we've got a range of diagnostic hubs. Now, hubs are normally taught as being transparent devices, but these guys, via the little rotary switch at the top left, can be made to do a number of quite clever things in complete isolation from the PLC. So we have, in the middle, we have a 3-channel copper based hub, and on the right we have a 2-channel copper, 2-channel fibre, should we need to convert from copper to fibre. We'll connect that up in a single segment. We'll call that Profibus DP segment number 1. We've also got, for my benefit, if I'm teaching at the bottom, we've got a little Vargo device that's sat on a separate segment of its own with an active terminator, if you know what they are. And then, in a separate rack, we'll be coming back to the master rack in a minute, we've got a 6-port version of the 2-port hub, and we've got an identical version of the fibre hub. And what we do here, again, taking advantage of some of the facilities of the hubs here, we join these two together in a redundant pair, so we can have cable redundancy without any configuration in the PLC. This is something the two hubs sort out on their own. And we also start to have a look at fibre. not only do we run the fibre, but we'll start to look at power budget and things like that, and you'll have the opportunity of using a little optical meter to see whether or not the optical power coming out of these devices is in spec and whether there's any significant losses over the length of that fibre as well. Out around here, and these are the devices now, these will all be connected to the network. Each of these desk-mounted racks have got 3 Profibus slaves in them, and we're going to wire them in a particular way. This one over the right we've wired because we want to take advantage of the redundancy. These guys here, the rest of them, are going to be initially wired in a conventional daisy chain. These colours are just there to emphasise that these are different Profibus segments, which has an impact when we're looking at the electrical waveform. We've got a number of PA devices. We can't electrically connect PA to Profibus DP, so basically we need a DP to PA coupler. And here we're using one from PNF, where we convert from Profibus DP into a segment protector, and then we come out of there and connect to the PA devices, and at the very top we have a PA adapter for using with the Profitrace. So you can see there's a lot of technology here, and also lots of different manufacturers. We're not plugging any one particular manufacturer here. Because we've got PA, as Phil's just been talking about, these PA devices are awash with parameters that a process engineer is likely to want to access during runtime, and that's not the role of the PLC. Well, via the technologies that Phil's just been talking about, then we have a field gate on there. This is one way of getting onto this. It's got a built-in web server, and we could use, in this case, the Anderson-Hauser field care software, and then show acyclic access to all of these PA devices and changing the parameters, etc. One of the limitations with analyzers, no matter whose analyzers it is if it's a laptop-based analyzer, it's not much use if it's sat in the back of your car. It can only tell you what's going on a Profibus network while it's plugged in. So we bring in the idea of permanent monitoring on Profibus networks, and we have a look at what they're doing as well. So this is the network at the moment. What we also do is we add a couple of lightning surge protectors, and this was done following some work I was doing with Welsh Water. And we don't talk about lightning surge protectors in particular, but what we do is show you what the effect of having those lightning surge protectors is on the electrical signal, and in doing so you'll learn a little bit more practically about reflections. You'll see them rather than me talking about them. We also talk about linking this to a Profinet network, so we've got that. And then finally, we bring all this lot together on a small industrial Ethernet and allow you to access it via a wireless. So we completely disconnect from the Profibus, and we take a look at what's the field gate telling us, what's the Combrix telling us, and so on and so on. So there's a lot to do on there, and this is the network that you would fault find on if you did the engineer. Online as well, this is the network that you are interacting with. Okay, from a Profinet point of view, very, very similar thing. We've got a couple of PLCs here. These are two S7 1200 PLCs, and we're going to connect them via various switches. We do use unmanaged in here every now and again to show you what the issue is with unmanaged, but these guys are managed conformance class B switches. And basically we're building this network up like this. We've got various racks around, and we're building this particular topology so that we've segregated these two guys. In each of these there are 3 Profinet I/O devices. We initially connect these guys with copper, and then we try it out with fibre to see how big a deal that is. And we also connect this with copper, and then we have a look at connecting these two with a Bluetooth wireless, and show you the ease of doing it, but also the problems that we can get when we get a timing issue over wireless, because wireless itself is becoming very popular. Just moving on then, we have, in this particular case, a Procentec Atlas, an analysing tool for Profinet. All analysing tools tend to come in two forms for Profinet. They have what's called active and passive diagnostics. Active are where the device actively polls the network via this connection into port 4. Not much use if these guys are unmanaged switches because they're not going to respond, but that's what they expect to happen. But what we're also interested in is being able to monitor the traffic for network loading purposes at the busiest point in the network. And we basically bring this guy in here and fundamentally define the criteria for the operational qualification of a Profinet network. We've got a firewall, and we can't generally use firewalls on Profinet. It's what's called a non-routable protocol, but here we're using it for some basic remote access. And what this little device does is it brings in technologies like network address translation, and it just gives you a basic idea of how you might want to secure your network. It's not a security course, but it gives you that idea of how we might want to limit access to technicians just to get to the web servers of switches, etc., rather than plugging in on the wiring itself. We also bring in what Andy was talking about. We start to look at MRP, see what the issues are there with timing, etc., etc. And finally, we bring in the topology. So whether or not you're doing this face-to-face or online, this is the network that you would be interacting with. In terms of the general flow of these courses, we've got to make sure that we're certifying the person that's given the certificate. So we're going to have to ask for some form of photo ID. During the course, if for the group, we will send out some kit. The kit will have a cable tester, connectors, and things like that. There'll be a video for you to watch to allow you to practice it. But once we get the registration, we give you access to the self-paced content, and you, by that time, you'll also be practicing your skills with the kit. And then eventually, we come to the exam day where we cross-check your photo ID, and depending on what it is we're using, then basically you'll be given access to the exam on the exam day, and the practical, which is effectively making up a cable, testing a cable, etc. Commissioning and maintenance, very, very similar. There's no exam involved, but this time there's going to need to be an access of interacting with this network, as I just showed you. And then finally, the engineer, similar kind of thing. The course content, a combination of self-paced and instructor-led, and the exam in an exam day. So that's generally how it's going to flow. Designer, I'll just quickly go through, very, very similar, except there's no practical. And that basically is it. And then we have the exam day. And the intention here is that we're planning on hosting this today at Henderson Hauser. There will be a PC per student, which will have a combination of these particular packages, each with a microphone and webcam on there. And during the time, you'll be given access to the examination. And then, depending on the course that you're doing, you might be brought up to a table where there'll be a video of you making up the cable and you showing evidence that that cable has passed. And you might also be given access to our online our online network. That's how it's all going to work. It's going to be from 2022. Might not be your kind of thing. Some people prefer it as being face-to-face. Others, this is exactly what they want because they've not got the time to attend a course. But this is very heavily promoted by PI. And at the moment, there's 6 PITCs, PI training centers around the world that have been authorized to do this. We're one of them, and the others are in Germany, Canada, and South America and places like that. So, something for you to think about. But I think the main thing, forgetting the online, all of these networks really can't be installed without thinking. Andy's talked about the design. Somebody needs to know about this technology. It's confusing enough listening to the technology. Actually practicing it is a different matter. And that's generally what you're going to be taught in these over a number of days or online, but without a sales aspect. It's just literally the technology and various things associated with it. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, Phil.